last traces of rest slowly lift from you, a gentle weight lifting from your shoulders as you rise. You do not move quickly. The pace is set by the slow turning of the deep indigo sky outside your narrow window. The air in the small room retains the cool, damp memory of the night, carrying faint undertones of banked smoke and old stone. You listen first, taking inventory of the city's breathing rhythm, even in this pre-dawn quietude. The deepest sounds are muffled, distant echoes that suggest life is gathering strength below you. It is a sound less like shouting than like the collective shifting of great bodies, the faint rumble of carts over cobbled streets, or perhaps the rhythmic clinking of water buckets being carried toward some early market stall. You pull back the linen curtain just enough to allow slivers of light to enter the room. The light that filters in is not bright, nor is it dark. It is a pale, milky gray struggling against the enduring shadows clinging to the upper reaches of the stone buildings across the way. You observe how this nascent light catches on dust motes dancing lazily near the threshold. Each speck seems suspended in time, illuminated briefly before settling back into the deeper gloom. This weak illumination is telling you that the day will be a slow unveiling, not a sudden burst. Your first movements are small and habitual. You gather your simple tunic, smoothing out the linen fabric, as if checking it for any unexpected wrinkles or snags. The scent of the woven plant fibers, mingled with the faint residual odor of sleep, grounds you in this moment of transition. You move to a low wooden chest where your implements rest, the tools that mark your trade and your devotion. Among them are several meticulously crafted points of reeds, ready for their service. You select one *Calamus* pen. Its tip feels smooth, worn just so by countless hours of use. The reed itself is resilient, capable of holding a crisp line over many days. You pick up the small jar containing residual black pigment from yesterday's work, noting the faint dryness of the surface. This early time demands an almost sacred precision, a quiet acknowledgement that you are preparing not just tools, but yourself for the careful discipline required ahead. There is a distinct coolness emanating from the stone floor beneath your bare feet. You walk deliberately towards the washing basin, drawing cold water that seems to wake up and cleanse both your hands and your mind simultaneously. The shock of the chill water against your skin sharpens your senses, bringing you fully into the rhythm of the waking world. As you wash your fingers, you contemplate the sheer volume of knowledge housed in words. How a simple, carefully formed letter can convey an entire legal mandate or recount a life's journey across centuries. The weight of this responsibility is not felt as panic, but as a profound sense of quiet purpose. You are a preserver. The physical continuity of the law depends on your persistent hand. This understanding settles over you like a fine, steady layer of cool grit. It defines the rhythm of your entire day, a measured tempo resists haste and rewards focus. You take a moment to observe the courtyard outside your small window again. A man is emerging from a nearby doorway, already dressed in his rough woolen toga, carrying a basket woven from reeds. He moves with the weary grace of someone who knows exactly what must be accomplished before true daylight arrives. You notice the way he inclines his head slightly as he passes, acknowledging all, yet recognizing the quiet space you inhabit, the sanctuary dedicated to thought and text. This initial observation helps regulate your breathing. Inhale slowly, counting through 4. Hold for 2. Exhale completely, releasing any lingering vestiges of dream or distraction. You realize that this methodical breathwork is perhaps the most important preparation for the day. It centers the restless energy into focused stillness. The transition from repose to active concentration must be gradual, like the sky changing color over hours. You return to your small work area, a simple table covered in worn wood and perpetually stained by history's inks. You arrange 3 sheets of fresh papyrus that were already stacked neatly by your mentor, rolled tight, waiting for the law to flow across them. The texture of these scrolls is feather-light, yet stubbornly substantial. They possess an ancient fragility that demands constant respect. Before beginning any preparation, you run a thumb lightly over the edge of one sheet. You feel the fine grain, the barely perceptible unevenness inherent in plant matter prepared for such rigorous use. There are no blemishes to be found, only the expectant blankness awaiting structure and meaning. This is where civilization records its memory, on this whisper-thin layer of cured reeds. The quiet anticipation you carry is a gentle thrumming beneath your skin, an acknowledgement of the long hours ahead. You know that the deepest concentration will come after dawn has fully claimed the sky. But for now, in the soft gray light, there is only preparation. A slow, deliberate ritual of making yourself worthy to touch the continuity of law. You pick up a piece of slate and chalk, lightly drawing precise lines on a scrap of discarded papyrus, a practice purely for measure. You map out the necessary column structure mentally, tracing the imaginary guidelines that will govern every single stroke you make throughout the day. The act is meditative, confirming the structured nature of your task. Nothing here is accidental. Everything must align with legal precedent and typographical necessity. The faint mineral scent, a mix of pulverized lapis, burnt oil from last night's lamp fuel, and dry papyrus, becomes the olfactory signature of your early hours. It is a unique smell, combining earthiness with meticulous human effort. You breathe it deeply, letting the aroma anchor you firmly to this profession, this life lived in service to the written word. You pause again, allowing the quietude to settle deep into the bones. The sound of the city remains muted. The distant calls are softer now, more tentative. It is a moment suspended between night and day, where only the steady beat of your own heart and the whisper of papyrus seem real. This meditative pocket of time confirms that your primary contribution today will be one of invisible stamina, maintaining perfect accuracy until the final scroll is bound. You find yourself in the quiet center of your preparation space, a low room filled with the scent of damp earth and dried reeds. The early morning air is cool against your skin, carrying the faintest grit of dust lifted by unseen movements outside. You are surrounded by the materials of your trade: stacked rolls of pale papyrus, pots of deep black ink, and trays holding mineral pigments that whisper faintly of rock and earth. Your attention first rests on the papyrus itself. The rolls are substantial, tied with rough twine, but you know better than to trust mere wrapping. You select a sheet by touch, feeling its weight. It is dry, yet not brittle. It holds a gentle resilience. As you unroll it across the smooth, worn wooden table, you examine it closely. Your fingers trace the weave of the plant fibers, noting where the papyrus was stripped or slightly warped from dampness, imperfections that must be accounted for. There is a geometry to its flaws, a pattern dictated by its journey through time and processing. This inspection is not merely quality control. It is a respectful acknowledgement of the material. You breathe in, catching the faint, almost sweet smell characteristic of newly prepared papyrus, a mixture of vegetation and slight alkali residue from the tanning process. This scent grounds you immediately in the reality of your work. This fragile skin holds permanence. You then turn to the pigments. These are not mere colors. They are compounds, processed minerals that must yield their deepest hues to liquid. You reach for a small, heavy mortar and pestle. The lapis lazuli is prized, deep blue dust derived from rock mined far away in distant lands. It feels cool and granular beneath your fingertips. Kneeling slightly, you begin the arduous process of grinding. This motion is rhythmic, repetitive, and deeply satisfying. The sound it makes is low, a soft, steady asterisk, schlick asterisk, a whisper against the stone that speaks of effort without strain. As the lapis grinds down into fine powder, you observe the way the dust catches the faint light slanting through the high window slits. It turns almost electric blue in the sun's meager rays. You mix this powdered pigment with binders, perhaps a gum arabic solution, or a carefully prepared egg yolk wash, to create a stable, vivid color meant for illumination or titles. Next is the ink preparation. This requires different minerals entirely: iron salts and gall nuts, ground into a fine suspension. The liquid takes on a rich, autumnal brown hue that deepens to black as it ages and settles. You mix this suspension slowly, observing how the various elements interact in the basin. It is an act of chemistry disguised as art. You are building permanence from ephemeral materials. The table now holds your implements: the prepared papyrus, the pigments mixed into thick pastes, and the ink ready to be drawn up with precision. Your mind begins to settle into a slow, deliberate tempo, mirroring the calm rhythm you have established through these preparations. You rest your hands for a moment, palms open, noting the faint smudges of earth-colored pigment under your nails. The weight of this material ritual is palpable. Every element must be perfect before the law can be rendered legible and lasting. You move to the corner where your writing tools are kept. These are not the delicate quills of later ages, but sturdy *Calamus* reeds, cut and sharpened precisely. You test several reeds against each other. Some are too coarse, their tips will fray too quickly. Others lack the necessary flexibility. Finally, you select a few that feel balanced and responsive when held correctly between your thumb and forefinger. The reed is natural, slightly hollow, and has been hardened by use into an ideal writing instrument. You dip one of these calibrated reeds carefully into the black ink. You observe the meniscus, the curved surface tension of the ink in the shallow basin. It promises depth and reliability. When you finally lift the reed, a perfect, viscous droplet clings to its tip. This single action summarizes everything: preparation, selection, understanding the medium, and anticipating the flawless line. The scent fills your nostrils now, the dry musk of papyrus mixing with the metallic tang of iron ink, overlaid by the subtle dustiness of ground minerals. It is a uniquely Roman aroma, the smell of civilization being meticulously catalogued and preserved. You do not think about the laws themselves, yet, only about the potential for them to exist on this clean sheet, given perfect form and flawless script. The early morning light continues its slow creep across the room, illuminating dancing particles of dust that seem to carry the faint echoes of all the scrolls you have ever copied. The surrounding city hums with a quiet pre-dawn energy. Distant shouts are muffled by walls. Cartwheels creak on oiled cobbles far away, and the general sound is one of restrained life. You arrange your working space, the papyrus perfectly flat before you, the ink within reach, the *Calamus* steady in your hand, the accumulated knowledge, the vast body of Roman law and literature that must pass through your fingertips feels immensely weighty, yet strangely comforting. It is a weight shared by centuries of scholars who walked this same floor, performing this identical ritual. You realize that your primary role is not to create new thought, but to make existing thought physically continuous, to ensure the words endure until they can be found again. The initial tasks are done, the instruments are tuned, the materials prepared, and the environment assessed for readiness. There remains a profound period of quiet anticipation. You breathe slowly, letting the rhythmic *thump* of your own heartbeat settle into the background hum of the awakening city. The deep focus required for this task is not a sudden burst of energy, but a prolonged state of disciplined calm that begins with mastering the small details, the optimal moisture content of the papyrus, the perfect blend of blue pigment, the flawless cut of a writing reed. This methodical start sets the necessary pace, a slow, unbreakable dedication to precision that will govern every stroke until evening calls you away. Air in the scriptorium is different from the cool, damp air of your small room. Here, it settles on you like a heavy, dry cloth, carrying the distinct, enduring scent of papyrus, a mix of dried plant fiber and mineral dust. It mingles with the sharper, metallic smell of iron gall ink that has been allowed to settle into the porous material over years. You draw a slow breath, allowing your lungs to absorb this unique atmosphere of dedicated work. You approach the large wooden table, its surface darkened by generations of spilled ink and rubbed wood grain. The morning light, filtered through the high, narrow window, catches the minute floating particles, dust motes dancing in the silent columns of brightness. They seem suspended, miniature constellations against the deep shadows of the room. Your task today is not invention, it is preservation. You are working with law, the asterisk ius Romanum asterisk. This material is heavy, far heavier than any physical scroll you might lift, because its weight is accumulated consensus and disciplined thought. It is the written scaffold upon which the city maintains its routine existence. You begin by selecting the papyrus sheet destined for this passage of law. You do not choose randomly. Your fingers skim the pile, testing the texture, seeking a flatness that promises no resistance to the quill tip. Each sheet must be pristine, unmarked by blemishes or the slight curl that suggests imperfect drying. When you finally select a piece deemed adequate, its pale, creamy surface feels cool and incredibly brittle under your fingertips. The sheer size of the task is immense. You recognize that this single sheet will become part of an endless chain of continuity, linking passages written centuries apart. The law demands structure, and that structure must first be imposed upon the blank surface. You reach for the measuring instruments, simple lead points, or sometimes just practiced sight lines to mark where the columns will fall. This is a precise act of geometry applied to text. You are not merely writing, you are engineering readability. You begin by marking the ruled lines with subtle, faint strokes. These guiding marks dictate the height and spacing for each character, ensuring that every law, no matter how complex or abstract its original drafting, occupies an ordered, readable place. There is a deep satisfaction in this methodical squaring off of space. You are taming a potential void into a functional vessel for human knowledge. The scraping sound as you draw the guiding lines across the papyrus is barely audible, yet it seems to resonate throughout the quiet room. It is the sound of intellectual discipline taking physical form. After setting your ruling, you pause, you study the empty surface and its promise, the vast potential for information contained within this simple weave of reeds. Then, you prepare the asterisk Calamus asterisk. The reed pen lies on a shallow dish next to your ink pot. Your fingers adjust its weight, feeling the slight natural resilience of the material that will guide the flow of ink. You dip the tip into the thick, dark liquid. The iron gall ink has a specific scent, a blend of tannins and minerals that feels ancient, rooted in earth chemicals and careful preparation. The first passage awaits you, a section dealing with civil rights or the definition of property boundaries. You take your time, concentrating not just on forming the letters correctly, but on maintaining a steady rhythm that allows the mind to settle into the task. The focus must be absolute, filtering out the sounds from the street outside and the faint scratching coming from neighboring desks. You begin the first phrase. The initial strokes are slow, deliberate. You feel the subtle drag of the papyrus fibers against the tip of the reed. It is a texture that requires constant acknowledgement. Each letter, every curve of an S, every sharp angle of a T is formed with respect for its neighbors and the law it embodies. The ink flows in controlled rivulets, dark against the pale background. As you work on one small segment, your mind starts to drift slightly. You are contemplating not just the words themselves, but the lives they affect, the boundaries of a farm, the claim on a person's earnings, the rights between families separated by distance. These legal texts are often abstractions, dense with clauses and exceptions. They carry the accumulated wisdom of jurisprudence, the attempts of great minds to categorize messy human interactions into clear rules. You realize that preserving this text is an act of collective memory, a refusal to let complexity fade into simple oral tradition or arbitrary local custom. The pace remains measured. The writing does not speed up even when your hand feels capable of more. Haste risks error, and error in law could have consequences far beyond a misplaced comma. You maintain the consistent weight and angle that has become second nature. Your body finds a kind of stillness while performing this repetitive, critical action. You are immersed wholly within the mechanics of the stroke. Dip, release, glide, lift. This movement becomes meditative, transforming what should feel like grueling labor into a steady, rhythmic chant in physical form. You observe how the characters build upon one another, forming structured blocks of meaning that demand equal space and attention. The faint scent of wet ink mixes with the pervasive dry smell of aging fibers, creating a unique aromatic fingerprint for this corner of the empire's knowledge storage. It is a clean, academic scent, utterly detached from the smells of open markets or cooking hearths. As you progress through several columns, describing relationships between civic authorities and citizens, you start to feel the deep pull of sustained concentration. Your gaze drops almost entirely onto the papyrus surface. The world outside the shouts, the rumble of carts, the smell of waste mingled with life, fades into a muted hum, simply existing beyond the borders of your focused sight. There is an underlying philosophy to this process. That knowledge must be ordered to survive. Chaos finds no home in carefully ruled columns, it disperses. Here, through repetitive application and geometric precision, you impose a stable order onto potentially mutable concepts. You are participating in the ongoing maintenance of civilization itself. The steady scratching continues, paragraph after structured paragraph. The light filtering into the room seems to deepen slightly as the morning progresses, moving from crystalline clarity toward a more mellow, sustained illumination. Every written word feels anchored by the sheer weight of countless hours spent by hands just like yours, all dedicated to making these laws legible. You occasionally pause, lifting your wrist slightly, resting it on the cool wood, letting the muscles in your forearm relax before returning to the precision required for the next phrase. This brief moment is enough to confirm that you are still present, connected to the material world and its rigorous demands. You take a slow look at the sheet, the emerging body of law, and realize how profoundly quiet this act of record-keeping must be. It cannot afford drama. It can only accommodate persistent, meticulous continuity. You settle your weight onto the low wooden stool, feeling the grain of dried oak beneath you. The chair is familiar, molded by the countless hours spent here, accepting the settled dust and the slight scent of weariness mixed with oil lamp smoke. Before you lies the papyrus sheet, already bearing a faint dusting of mineral residue from previous work. You do not need to examine it closely. Its surface texture tells you everything. Smooth where ink has dried, slightly rough where the pulp remains untouched by the reed pen. The air in the scriptorium is cool and still, holding that distinctive smell, a blend of sharp, acidic iron gall ink, sweet, dry papyrus fibers, and faint sweat from your own concentration. You shift your posture slightly, adjusting the angle at which the table slopes towards you. This small adjustment seems profoundly important, setting the geometry for hours of steady work. Your fingers rest near the vat of ink. The liquid is a deep sepia brown, thick enough that when the reeds dip into it, they do not absorb instantly, but gather the pigment in a satisfying meniscus. You lift your right hand, feeling the smooth, curved length of the Calamus pen resting lightly across your lower palm. It has been dipped and moved so many times over decades that it feels like an extension of your own bone, requiring little conscious effort to guide it. The movement begins with extreme deliberation. There is no rush, only persistence. You do not think about the words you are writing, the intricate clauses of a provincial law, or the necessary details of a property boundary dispute. Instead, you focus entirely on the mechanics, the precise contact point between the tip and the absorbent surface, the controlled release of pressure that keeps the line even, dark, and unbroken. With a shallow breath, you gently guide the Calamus into the ink vat, The reeds drink deeply, slowly transferring the darkness onto their tapered ends. Then, with a minimal lift, you touch the nib to the papyrus. It is not a stroke of passion or urgency. It is an event measured in millimeters. You draw out the first syllable. The line emerges dark and unwavering, leaving behind the signature scent of burnt minerals mixed with drying plant matter. This initial movement, slow and controlled, seems to wake up the sheet itself, giving it definition. The rhythm takes over almost before you realize you have begun a deep work state. Dip, lift, draw. The motion is continuous, flowing from your elbow through your wrist, keeping the force steady and constant. You are not merely writing words, you are transcribing thought across time, moving centuries of accumulated legal reasoning onto fragile plant material. It requires an stamina that goes beyond simple arm strength. It demands a meditative vigilance. As you continue, patterns begin to emerge in your mind, mirroring the textual structure. The careful alignment of these clauses, separated by the necessary spaces, is not arbitrary. Each space signifies a break in logic, a pause in legal argument, and maintaining that visual rhythm helps maintain the mental track. You feel acutely aware of the sheer quantity of surface you are covering, the miles of thought packed onto relatively modest sheets. The papyrus itself feels almost impossibly thin beneath your careful ministrations, capable of holding such monumental weight. Occasionally, a minor interruption breaks this steady flow. Perhaps the light shifts, or the concentration falters for a breath too long. You pause, and in that sudden void of motion, you simply observe the table. You notice the minute scratches etched into the wood by centuries of reeds, tiny scars from disciplined hands. You realize these marks are testament not to failure, but to endless continuation. The sheer dedication required is monumental, an almost invisible labor that anchors a sprawling civilization. Every carefully copied comma, every precise designation of ownership prevents a dispute from escalating into violence, keeps the mechanisms of governance turning smoothly, and allows daily life, the baking of bread, the movement of goods through the forum, to continue undisturbed by legal chaos. You lift your head slightly, not to look at anything in particular, but simply to reset your focus. You take a moment to observe the quality of the light spilling into the scriptorium from the nearby window opening. The day is advancing, meaning the sun has crossed different sections of the sky outside. Dust motes dance visibly in the stronger beams that penetrate the dusty glass panes, each speck tracing a miniature, unpredictable path against the stable columns of your writing. This fleeting, chaotic movement contrasts sharply with the steadfast permanence of the law beneath your pen. The focus narrows again, pulling you back to the steady, comforting resistance of the papyrus. You feel the slight scrape of the damp Calamus tip meeting the prepared surface. Your mind settles into the task like a river seeking its lowest plane slowly and surely toward the goal. You are immersed in the syntax of law, which demands perfect adherence to established forms. You count the strokes less than you think. They become an extension of your own breathing. The rhythmic motion starts to guide your breath, forcing it into long, even exhalations that complement the steady sweep of the reed pen. This coupling of breath and motion is what transforms simple writing into a sustained form of quiet meditation. The weight of preservation is not felt in dramatic bursts. It settles quietly on your shoulders like the accumulating dust on an unused scroll. It is the knowledge that when this sheet finally leaves your desk, it will travel to someone, a magistrate, a landowner, a plebeian seeking justice, and their understanding of their right or duty hinges entirely on your continued accuracy for these hours. The ink sometimes dries too quickly, requiring you to pause and simply wait for the subtle chemical process to complete its work. You watch the damp edges of the script slowly darken, sealing the words into permanent form. It is a gentle alchemy: water, minerals, reeds, time, and sheer human will, binding knowledge into matter. You dip the Calamus once more. The motion is fluid, effortless in its expertise. You find yourself moving through passages that have been refined by hands before yours, the scribes of your ancestors, who struggled with similar materials, similar lighting, and perhaps less stable empires. You are connected to a long chain of human endeavor, tethered by the common material and the universal need for order. The steady motion continues, minute after practiced minute. Your world narrows down until it contains only this small rectangle of pale papyrus, the dark reservoir of ink, and the graceful sweep of your hand executing necessary truth. You are nothing more than a vessel for continuity, letting history flow through the tip of the reed pen, keeping the vast river of Roman life flowing steadily forward. The scent of cooled ink and dry papyrus clings to your robes, a familiar perfume that speaks of hours spent in disciplined quiet. You finish dipping the asterisk Calamus asterisk into the deep black fluid, watching the dark pigment coat the tapered reed tip before releasing it onto the ruled space. The passage you have just copied, a section dealing with property rights, or perhaps inheritance, rests solid and finished on your work surface. It is another segment of civilization preserved, transferred from memory or original source to this fragile, clean expanse of Egyptian fiber. You pause, letting the ink dry slightly on the fibrous surface. You feel the subtle drag against your fingertips as you run them lightly across a completed line, confirming its solidity, checking for any wavering or bleed-through that might suggest carelessness. This small physical check becomes a miniature ritual, affirming the truth of the text and the diligence of your own hand. The work is not merely copying words, it is maintaining a lifeline. If this law were lost, what part of Roman life What routine of justice, what expectation of ownership might fall into confusion? The quiet hum beneath the stillness of the scriptorium begins to draw your focus outward. The main doors, usually barely noticeable against the rough stone wall, catch a sudden influx of sound and shifting light. You remain seated at your slanted desk, absorbing the sounds without disturbing the painstaking concentration required for the ink before you. The first noises are gentle, the rhythmic thump drag of wooden sandals on the cobbled ground outside. These footsteps carry varying paces, the quick, uneven scramble suggesting urgency, perhaps a merchant late for an early market transaction, the measured, steady beat of someone moving with authority, like a magistrate or perhaps a senator returning from the forum courts. You lift your gaze slowly to the narrow opening, allowing your eyes to adjust to the brighter light spilling in. The air that enters is cooler than the contained space of the scriptorium carrying faint, earthy smells, a blend of dust kicked up by passing feet, the sharp tang of wood smoke from cooking fires, and perhaps the sweeter underlying scent of unwashed humanity. The flow of people is a gentle tapestry you observe. The bright glare reflecting off stone surfaces momentarily obscures your view, forcing you to recalibrate your focus back to the structured gravity of the law before you. You note the varying articles of clothing, the simple tunics of laborers moving with slumped shoulders, the more elaborate, dyed wools that indicate higher status, draped carefully over musculature, suggesting care in appearance as much as practical necessity. You see children weaving through the legs of adults near the periphery of your vision. They move with a liquid abandon that contrasts sharply with the rigid adherence to form and structure you practice every moment. Their wooden toys, a carved animal perhaps, or a simple wheeled cart, bounce against the rhythm of passing life, creating small, joyous sounds amidst the grand seriousness of the city's machinery. The weight of this observation is unexpected, offering a brief respite from the monumental task at hand. You realize that while you spend your hours transcribing immutable principles drawn from dusty records, the city outside operates on far more immediate rhythms: hunger, commerce, brief moments of joy, and the necessity of simple survival. These everyday movements are undocumented. They exist solely in the transient moment. Your fingers twitch slightly, remembering the lesson that discipline must apply to all aspects of life. You gently place your hand flat upon the ruled papyrus, feeling the slight coolness of the surface beneath your skin. The vibrant, fleeting chaos outside is absorbed into a quiet understanding. These passing lives are what the laws you copy attempt to govern, stabilize, and give enduring structure to. They provide the context for all the legal passages contained within your careful lines. The movement settles back into a deeper rhythm as a particularly robust cart wheels pass closer by, rattling over uneven stones. The noise is louder here, immediate enough that you involuntarily tense the muscles in your neck and shoulders. You breathe out slowly, letting the residual vibration dissipate before it can disturb the delicate concentration required for writing. You catalog the sounds, the groan of the axle, the shouts of men calling out goods or destinations, the clatter of ceramic pottery being moved. Each sound is a piece of ephemera, instantly dissolved into background noise. You take another minute to simply observe the texture of the light itself, now filtered by the surrounding buildings, and perhaps by some hanging cloths or awnings. It does not fall evenly. It breaks into patches, bright, dust motes dancing squares, followed by deeper shadows that pool in the doorways and between the tightly packed structures. This natural quality of illumination changes everything about the appearance of the city, making certain colors seem richer at midday, while deepening all other tones to a soft gray. The papyrus waits patiently under your steady gaze. The law remains fixed, its structure is absolute. Yet, the world outside, the people, the passage of light, the shifting noises demonstrates constant, vibrant change. You recognize this tension, the necessary contrast between the permanence of documented law and the ceaseless dynamism of human existence. It is a recognition that deepens your understanding of why your work matters so deeply. You raise the Calamus again. The moment of external observation passes. The rhythmic calling fades slightly, settling into a low, consistent background thrum. Your posture straightens almost imperceptibly. You dip the reed pen once more, gathering the midnight black ink, and place it with meticulous care along the curve of a newly printed passage. The work continues, guided by both the intellectual rigor of the law and the profound quietude found in remembering everything that passes without leaving a trace. You are deep into the passages, your hand moving with a slow, measured grace. The faint scent of iron gall ink mixes with the dry, aged smell of papyrus, a familiar aroma that settles around you like a second skin. For hours, this rhythm has been your life. Dip the Calamus steady stroke, lift the point. Yet, today feels different. Today's work is not merely copying. It requires understanding how separate laws intersect, tracing lines between principles codified long ago and those still guiding daily life in the forum. You are no longer simply a transcriptionist of words. You are an interpreter of Roman thought, holding together the accumulated knowledge of centuries. Your focus shifts inward, moving beyond the physical act of writing to the mental architecture of the text itself. The papyrus sheet before you is already littered with columns of elegant lettering. But now your thoughts jump between these established lines, like a student studying several related books at once. You must cross-reference statutes, checking if this section on property writes conflicts with an older edict concerning temple donations, or perhaps how the authority granted to local magistrates modifies the central imperial decree. This is not the mechanical reproduction of text. It is intellectual archaeology. You pause your writing, letting the reed pen rest lightly on the ruled margin. Your gaze does not follow a single line, but seems to drift across an entire section, searching for coherence and harmony among disparate ideas. When you begin again, the movement changes subtly. You start linking phrases that are far apart in the original source material. You might write a summary note beneath one law citing its connection to another volume stored in the great archive beyond the scriptorium walls. This requires patience of a different kind, patience with uncertainty. A scribe must know not only what the words say, but also how the authority behind those words evolved through time. The weight of that continuous lineage presses down gently on your shoulders, not as physical burden, but as quiet responsibility. You lift your head slightly, feeling the faint ache in your wrist and neck muscles, the steady tax paid for keeping civilization's memory intact. The air feels cool against your skin, a perfect contrast to the slight warmth radiating from your own concentrated presence. Around you, other scribes maintain their individual worlds of concentration. Some are writing law, others are copying poetry or philosophical tracts. Yet, all share this deep commitment to structure and permanency. You notice the faint dust motes suspended in the shafts of light slanting through the high windows, each speck seeming infinitesimally delicate, yet caught in a pattern of enduring permanence, mirroring the structured nature of law itself. You meticulously examine the original source texts that form your guide. They are often rolled scrolls, fragile and brittle, smelling strongly of dried vegetal matter and time. You handle them with practiced reverence, treating them as if they were made of spun glass. Before you cross-reference a passage from an ancient volume, you might spend moments simply tracing the curve of its edge, feeling the slight degradation of the material. This physical interaction grounds you in the immense timeline you are touching, centuries stacked upon decades. Each word a carefully maintained stone in the edifice of Roman legal thought. Sometimes, a passage appears deliberately vague or contradictory when viewed through modern eyes. But for you, steeped in the context of Roman jurisprudence, it holds a specific meaning understood only by those who study the archive. You understand that ambiguity itself can be a precise point of law. It is not enough to write down the words. You must encode their nuanced legal implications into your own surviving copy. This requires drawing connections, making intellectual scaffolds that will support future scholars hundreds of years from now. The act of scholarship here is fundamentally an act of preservation through association. You are creating a map, a textual network, showing how law feeds into Statute B, and how both are modified by the cultural context described in Commentary C. Your handwriting becomes not just a record, but a diagram of thought itself. The precise spacing between your lines grows more deliberate. Each interlined space represents a logical division, a pause for consideration that was crucial to the original legal reasoning. As you reach a point where the laws intersect in particularly complex ways, you slow down even further. You might dip your Calamus and then hesitate, letting the ink pool slightly on the tip. Instead of writing immediately, you look up at the columns surrounding you, noticing the steady sweep of a man sweeping dust near the doorway, or the soft shift of fabric against stone. This brief moment of observation is not a break. It is an act of internal processing. You allow the background rhythms of life, the far-off clatter of sandals, the muffled arguments outside, to settle and give shape to the complex web of statutes you hold in your mind. This constant need for context, for understanding how one idea supports or diminishes another, is exhausting but deeply satisfying. It gives the repetitive labor a scholarly profundity. You are constantly adjusting your perspective, viewing each single passage not in isolation, but within the entire weight of Roman civilization's legal and social development. Your quiet concentration becomes a deep well of accumulated memory. When you finally write a concluding paragraph that successfully synthesizes 3 disparate pieces of law into one coherent statement for your copy, there is a profound sense of stillness, a deep hum of intellectual completion that surpasses mere physical satisfaction. You have woven history together, keeping the fragile fabric of legal continuity whole and ready to endure another age. The sun has climbed high, filtering into the scriptorium in thick, warm shafts. You feel a subtle change within yourself. The intense concentration of copying law passages for hours demands a physical break. The rhythm established by the scraping reed and the steady dip of the ink cannot be maintained indefinitely without ceasing to breathe. Slowly, you allow your hand to rest upon the table's surface, stopping the movement that has become as predictable as the breathing of the great city outside. You rise from the wooden stool, feeling the slight stiffness in your lower back. The papyrus under your hands, so perfectly weighted and smooth moments ago, now seems almost weightless by comparison. You move toward a small preparation niche where basic sustenance is kept, a simple corner dedicated to refueling both body and mind. Here, the smells change entirely. The cool mineral scent of dried ink gives way to something richer, warmer. You reach for a loaf of bread, its crust dusted with flour and smelling faintly of the communal oven. Beside it lies a block of cheese, pale yellow and solid, bearing the faint, earthy tang of brine and animal fat. These are simple things, utterly devoid of luxury or ceremony, yet they hold all the immediate reality of your life here in Rome. The light striking the table now illuminates tiny specks of dust, suspended between the rafters and the dusty floor tiles, visible only when the air is still. You notice how this dust settles, a constant reminder of movement and decay, contrasted against the rigid permanence of the laws you transcribe. Eating these humble rations becomes more than mere refueling. It is an immersion into the grounding reality that supports your scholarly endeavor. You settle back down near the natural light source, carefully breaking off a piece of bread. The crumb resists slightly under your teeth, giving way with a quiet crumble. You chew slowly, drawing out the texture and the mild sourness of the starter. This simple act forces your attention entirely inward into the rhythm of digestion and breath. It is an enforced pause that grants mental space. While chewing, you observe the movement just beyond the open doorway, the passage of a water carrier traversing the street outside. The rhythmic splash of the buckets hitting stone, the soft shuffle of sandals on packed earth. These sounds are familiar, dependable fixtures in the day's soundtrack, yet each repetition is its own slight variation. You take a small piece of cheese and bring it to your mouth. Its texture is dense, almost buttery, melting slightly against your tongue. The taste reminds you momentarily that outside these walls, life proceeds with an unceasing practicality, the work of fetching water, trading goods, or simply moving from one necessary place to the next. The contrast between this bustling exterior rhythm and the absolute stillness required at your desk is profound. Outside, existence is volatile, determined by muscle and immediate need. Inside, existence here is defined by permanence, determined by grammar, precedent, and written statute. You pick up a small earthenware cup used for water, running a thumb over its cool, slightly gritty surface. The simple weight of the ceramic feels anchoring in your hand. You realize that maintaining this physical grounding, the bread, the cheese, the cooling stone cup, is as essential to preserving legal continuity as sharpening a Calamus asterisk or mixing ink. A clear mind requires an anchored body. As you slowly finish the small meal, the midday buzz of the city seems to recede slightly, muffled by thick walls and scholarly focus. You allow your thoughts to drift away from the specific clauses of the law for a few minutes. You think about what it means to hold so much history in your memory, and even more so within these fragile rolls of papyrus. The laws you copy are not merely words, they are accumulated consensus, thousands of decisions made by men who lived and breathed long ago. Each omission, each misplaced comma, could quietly undermine a centuries-old understanding of justice or civic duty. This intellectual weight is often heavier than the actual scrolls themselves. You notice the subtle variations in the quality of light now that the sun has passed its zenith. The direct glare softens, diffusing through the high window openings. The sunlight shifts from being aggressive to becoming gently encompassing, warming the pale dust and illuminating the fine grooves worn into your work surface by countless elbows and forearms. After the quiet sustenance, a fresh sense of disciplined energy begins to pool in your limbs. You wash your hands carefully at a basin stocked with cool water, the sensation refreshing the skin and clearing the mind's residual fog from simple eating. The water feels cool against the slight heat accumulating beneath your robes. This small ritual washes away the residues of both sustenance and idleness. You look down at the papyrus sheet lying before you. Its untouched lines await the next passage, waiting patiently for your meticulous hand to bring its law back into existence. The break has done its necessary work. It has reset the body, centered the mind, and renewed the quiet acceptance of the day's task. The air in the scriptorium settles again, deepening with the dry, clean smell of aged papyrus and minerals. You gently dip your Calamus into the pot of iron gall ink. The nib catches the black liquid, drawing up a perfect measure of pigment, the promise of more hours to come. Each stroke representing not just writing, but the gentle persistence of Roman order against time itself. This is the quiet rhythm that defines your existence. And as you prepare for the next passage, you are ready to settle back into the steady discipline of the law. The sun has climbed high and now begins its slow descent, shifting the quality of light entering the scriptorium. You feel the subtle change in temperature against your skin, a gentle cooling that signals the shift from the midday heat. The air, which was thick with the scent of dry papyrus and concentrated ink during your work, seems to soften, carrying hints of dust kicked up from the nearby forum streets by an unseen wind. The golden hour begins its subtle reign over the vast chamber, bathing the rolls of prepared vellum and the polished wooden tables in a warm, honeyed glow. You continue the meticulous process of tracing law onto fragile sheets, your movements remaining steady, economical, and deeply ingrained with repetition. Each stroke of the Calamus is measured not just by skill, but by the receding light itself. Your eyes are adapting to this changing illumination, the sharp contrast between areas hit directly by the sunbeams and those already falling into shadow becomes more pronounced. You notice how the dust motes, suspended in these increasingly angled shafts of late afternoon sunlight, seem to glitter momentarily before drifting down, silent witnesses to your labor. This shifting pattern of light across the room offers a visual rhythm to the work. Brightest focus where the sun touches, softer study where the shadows creep. You lean back momentarily, allowing your shoulders to release the tension accumulated over hours spent hunched over the writing surface. You observe the way the late afternoon light catches the minerals used in your pigments, the deep blue of lapis dust, or the rich brown of iron gall earth, making them seem almost alive against the pale background of the finished parchment. This moment of quiet viewing helps to recenter your concentration, grounding you once more in the physical materials before resuming the delicate flow of writing. The legal texts you transcribe are not merely collections of words. They are threads linking generations, documents designed to maintain order across changing times and distant peoples. As the golden light warms the room, you think of the sheer weight of that responsibility. You are a steward, entrusted with holding the memory, the operational blueprint of Roman law. The fragility of papyrus mirrors the perceived fragility of civilization itself. Yet, it is precisely this fragile material that possesses such profound structural permanence. The rhythm of your work slows marginally, matching the gradual decline of daylight. Fewer passages need to be drafted in rapid succession now. Instead, you engage in a more deliberate kind of textual refinement. You might find yourself reviewing older sections, cross-checking punctuation, or subtly smoothing out phrasing that was initially imprecise. This is not just copying. It is a quiet act of curation. You are polishing history as you write it down. The sounds surrounding the scriptorium become clearer now that the central heat and bustle of the day have passed. The clatter of a dropped amphora far away, the distant bark of a dog, the muffled resonance of sandals on paving stones, these noises arrive sounding distinctly different in the golden light. They are wrapped in a mantle of evening quiet, suggesting preparation for stillness. You feel the familiar, subtle grit forming under your fingernails from the frequent handling of vellum and inkstones. A small, automatic gesture precedes your return to the writing. You pick up the scrapers meant for cleaning the edges of the papyrus sheet, feeling the cool, dense material against your fingers. It is a tactile ritual that prepares both your hands and your mind for the coming continuation. The warmth of the late sun offers comfort, but it also hints at its departure. You consider the necessary transition away from natural illumination. The gradual loss of light across the chamber becomes a palpable thing, forcing a quiet mental preparation for the arrival of artificial sources. Your focus shifts subtly from the sunlight's rhythm to anticipating the controlled glow that will soon take its place. The need for supplemental light is noticeable. The eastern corner of your workspace, once bright and clear in the morning, is now submerged in growing shadow. You recognize this natural decline, and it dictates the next necessary action. The task remains sacred. The law must continue to be recorded, but the means of recording must change with the day's passing. The soft warmth of the approaching evening deepens the quiet within the scriptorium. Outside, the heat of the Roman day begins its gentle release into the cooler air of twilight. You continue your work at the great wooden table, the oil lamps casting an increasingly intimate glow across the workspace. This is a time for measured strokes and deep focus, where the world seems to narrow down to the point where the reed pen meets the papyrus. You feel the subtle chill rising from the stone floor, a contrast to the warm concentration gathered around your lamp. Your movements become more economical, perfected by hours of practice. Every dip of the calamus into the inkwell is precise. You do not waste motion or breath. The lamplight does not illuminate evenly. It gathers near the paper and dissipates slowly toward the corners, stretching shadows that dance like long, ink-eye fingers across the scrolls stacked nearby. These shadows are a physical manifestation of time passing, marking the hours under the cover of artificial light. You notice how the contrast makes the careful indentations left by your ruling tools, the faint guidelines, appear sharper than they did at midday. They serve as silent reminders of the structure that must underpin all knowledge. Your current passage requires perfect adherence to established legal phrasing. You are not merely copying words, you are replicating an authoritative continuity. The weight of what you transcribe is immense, a history accumulated across centuries, condensed onto fragile sheets. When you set your mind to understanding the rhythm of these laws, they seem less like dry rules and more like the steady heartbeat of Rome itself, a predictable, vital pulse that demands perpetual record-keeping. The papyrus beneath your hand feels cooler now than when the sun streamed in. You can perceive its faint dryness, the slightly brittle quality that comes with age and handling. Running a thumb lightly across a newly written column, you feel the microscopic texture of the material, smooth where the fibers lie flat, yet yielding just enough to accommodate the pressure of the pen. It is an inherently fragile thing, this vessel for human thought, reminding you how careful you must be. The ink itself has changed character since morning. In the midday light, it was vibrant and almost black, catching the sun's glare faintly. Now, under the lamp's yellowing glow, its depth appears more mysterious, a dark, liquid pool that seems to absorb what surrounds it. You dip your calamus slowly, watching the ink wick up the delicate tip of the reed. This moment is a pure ritual, the pause before creation. The repetitive action of writing begins to feel less like labor and more like meditation. Your mind settles into the cadence of the language you are reproducing. The rhythm is established by the breath, inhale, set the pen, exhale, stroke the papyrus. This steady physical motion becomes a conduit for quiet concentration. You might pause after transcribing a particularly complex legal clause. In that momentary stillness, your awareness expands beyond the immediate page. You become acutely sensitive to the sounds that rarely interrupt the scriptorium's work. The soft creak of the wooden stool you sit upon, the nearly imperceptible asterisk tink asterisk of oil from a lamp being adjusted nearby, or the almost imagined whisper of distant city life passing through the heavy walls. These small auditory details ground you in the present. They remind you that while your task is eternal, to preserve the text, you exist within a specific moment under this particular glow, surrounded by these unique materials. The careful transcription demands total presence. You are sorting out permanence from transience. Writing law means accepting that human life, with its varied and swift motions outside, must adhere to predictable structure for it to function at all. You slowly shift your body in the chair, adjusting a muscle that has been held taut since early morning. The scent of the mixed materials, the faint metallic tang of the iron gall ink mingling with the dry smell of cured papyrus and lamp oil, becomes a defining characteristic of your working existence. It is the specific odor of civilization preserved through diligence. When you breathe in this air, it carries not just dust, but the weight of human effort. The process continues steadily. You find yourself entering a state where observation requires almost no conscious effort. Your hands simply know the necessary angles and pressures. Your focus narrows down to the ink line itself. You see the perfect uniformity of the curve after one letter, and the slight irregularity of the next, these subtle variations becoming critical data points for maintaining accuracy over many hours. As you approach the final section of this particular scroll, a quiet sense of accomplishment begins to gather. It is not boisterous celebration, but a deep internal satisfaction derived from completion. You move through the last few clauses with an even steadiness, knowing that these specific words, perfectly rendered, will guide future generations. They will inform the courts and structure the trade route centuries from now. The final strokes are deliberately slow. Each *Calamus* movement is weighted with care, a quiet benediction upon the knowledge it contains. When you set the pen down for the last time on the sheet, there is a perceptible shift in the room's atmosphere. The immediate pressure to create something new lifts, allowing your mind to absorb the completion of the task. Your hands feel tired, but not depleted. They feel settled and satisfied by their work. You lift the finished papyrus with painstaking care, handling it as if it were delicate glass. You note its clean, uniform surface, a testament to sustained concentration. This perfect copy must now be dry, stable, and preserved for the archives. With the final sections completed, you begin the ritual of documentation. You carefully stack the finished rolls, aligning them with their counterparts from previous days' work. The stacking is methodical, creating neat columns in your working pile. You fold one last scroll corner, noting its crisp edges and clean lines against the worn wood surface. Each roll represents not just text, but a portion of continuity, a day's worth of civilization safely contained. You push these finished rolls into their designated storage container, preparing them to be bound or archived for the morning's review. The act is one of careful guardianship. You are ensuring that when the next scribe takes over, they find not chaos, but order, ready to resume the relentless march of recorded history. The steady glow of the lamp now seems less like a necessary aid and more like a shared resource, illuminating your quiet triumph over the sheer magnitude of required labor. The work of the day is finally complete. You lift your head from the papyrus, and the deep exhaustion settles in your shoulders, a gentle weight that feels earned, not like a burden. The lamplight, which had seemed so bright just moments ago, now seems soft and yellowed, bathing the scriptorium in an amber quietude. The first ritual is always the cleaning. You reach for the bowl of water, noticing how still the surface reflects the scattered glow of the lamps. The ink, that rich mixture of gall and earth minerals, demands respect even when spent. You slowly dip your Calamus into a basin meant for rinsing, feeling the smooth resistance of the reed tip against the liquid. This act is methodical, an ingrained habit born of years of absolute precision. You wash away not just the ink, but the accumulated detritus of concentration, the microscopic fragments of papyrus dust and pigment residue. The table surfaces are scrubbed down with a damp cloth that smells faintly of old lime mortar and simple oils. You gather your writing implements. The reeds stand upright in their container, resting quietly side by side, their tips darkened slightly from use today. The pigments, carefully ground and dried earlier, you gently brush into their designated earthen pots. Everything must be returned to its place, organized not for inspection, but for continuity. Disorder here would mean a break in the historical record itself. You turn your attention first to the papyri that have accumulated on your side of the large work table. These are the finished scrolls and sheets, the legal passages you labored over from dawn until now. They feel different from the fresh, pristine rolls awaiting their use tomorrow. They carry a palpable history. Each surface is covered in the disciplined precision of Roman script, forming rows upon neat rows of articulated thought. You lift one sheet, feeling its crisp, dry texture under your fingertips, noting the subtle indentations that mark where the reed tip pressed down so many hours ago. Handling them requires care. These are not merely pieces of dried plant fiber. They are conduits for civilization's accumulated knowledge. The laws inscribed upon them dictate how people live, how disputes are settled, and how the very structure of your ordered life functions. You stack them carefully in a neat pyramid on the designated shelf. As you arrange each one, you examine the title passage once more, the small signature at the top corner, identifying the text's origin or its date of completion. It is a silent accounting, confirming that today's labor has been successfully incorporated into the vast, enduring library. The sounds of the city begin to shift rhythmically outside the scriptorium window. The intense bustle that defined your day, the hawking cries, the measured clatter of sandals on stone, the shouts near the forum, is mellowing out. You can hear fewer sharp noises now. Instead, there is a deeper, more resonant sound, the echoing calls of bath attendants, or perhaps the heavier, slower tread of guards completing their rounds. The air smells distinctly different than it did at midday. The sharp, cooking scent of wood smoke has been replaced by a cooler, damper night smell, a mix of cool stone and evening dew settling into the alleyways. You finally clear your workspace. You stack any remaining scraps, rolling up empty pieces of papyrus with measured folds, recognizing that even waste is valuable for fuel or further practice. The great table, once marked by streaks of ink and the subtle abrasion of countless reeds, seems to exhale its day's work into the cool evening air. The weight of the accumulated text settles over you now, not a physical weight on your chest, but an intellectual one. You sit back, allowing yourself a moment to simply observe the transition. The remaining lamps cast elongated shadows that dance slightly as the night air shifts through the open lintel. These shadows feel like abstract concepts, the vague boundaries between day and night, history and present, ink and empty space. You think about the immense scale of what you have contributed today. You did not formulate new laws, you merely recorded existing ones. Yet, this act of reproduction is fundamentally vital. By preserving these scripts, the precedents, the rulings, the forgotten philosophies, you ensure that tomorrow, when a crisis arises or a debate sparks, the foundations for an answer will still exist on those fragile surfaces. The written word, it seems, possesses a kind of enduring, quiet permanence. The air cools around you, drawing into your lungs with a deep satisfaction. You gather your small personal satchel, the cloth pouch where your few remaining pigments and specialized tools rest. Your departure from the scriptorium is done slowly, mindfully. You do not hurry. The day's work has already consumed enough of your energy for hasty movements. Each step taken across the cool stone floor feels like a detachment, leaving the intense focus and concentrated silence of the scriptorium behind. Pausing briefly at the entrance, you look back at the rows of stacked papyri. They stand silently, illuminated only by the dwindling glow from within, perfect repositories of Roman order. You feel an immense, quiet kinship with them, a shared commitment to endurance. Tomorrow, when dawn calls and the work begins anew, the pattern will repeat itself. The careful preparation, the methodical dip of the reed, the continuous flow of thought made material through ink and fiber. This rhythm is the heart of your life, the steady pulse by which memory itself beats on in the city's shadow. You turn and begin